staff, the way you relate to one another, the chemistry, the dynamics of worship and the prophetic. And so you want to remember to continue to guard that chemistry. And so one of the ways I think about that, let me say this, be encouraged in this. As you go from launch to establishing roles, some of the laborers that will serve you long term will be found in the harvest. So you can take some of the pressure off of like, gosh, I don't know if I have this in my launch team or this in my launch team. Then you're going to be believing for those things in the harvest as you begin to reach people, that God is going to bring people and raise up people that really excel in some of these things. So really be believing for what you're going to find in the harvest of people that you begin to gather that will really bless and benefit the church. And but on this idea of culture, there's a little phrase that we've learned. It was something we were kind of already really felt, but I think the phrase is very helpful, and that's be slow to hire and quick to fire. We've been a little bit better on the first one than the second one, though we've learned our lessons on that. We feel pretty strongly in terms of guarding the culture, of really being thoughtful, prayerful, and deliberate in our decisions on hiring people. Now that can vary on the type of position you're filling. We have an internship program now of people coming out of the day school, but and so that's a little different. We're not doing quite as much vetting or quite as much making sure they're younger people and they've they're coming in with just hearts ready to disciple and do whatever. And so of course they've got the application interview process, and we want to make sure their hearts are aligned. But it gets even a little more serious when you're beginning to hire older people that have had more life experience, when you are hiring people for higher level positions in the church. We recently, in the last couple of years, made one of our first big outside of our church hires. They're still within the Antioch movement, which highly recommend if that's an option. But someone we didn't know well, someone that had been serving overseas, and so didn't know them super well. I'd run into them at a few conferences here and there, and played basketball together. But other than that, hadn't had any real connect time. And so we really had the fear of the Lord on that, because we had a great culture as a team. We loved it. We were thriving and moving, and so we were just really had the fear of the Lord, like, God, we want this to be you. And so went through quite a process of trying to get to know them, talk with them. We had them out here, talking it through, and even in the end, though we did give them a pitch, I was like, God, if this is the right fit, bring them, because they had a couple opportunities. Then so be it. And so they ended up coming, and it's been beautiful, a wonderful fit. So there are times where you're making you're having some risk in it, but as best you can, that process of being slow to hire is good. Not making rash decisions or being blinded by somebody's gifting, like, oh my gosh, this is the best. I've never heard somebody lead worship so great, or whatever. Or their prophetic ear is right on. It's like, and so you want to not make the mistake of going too quickly, or it could really cost you in the end. Could cause a lot of hurt and pain in the end. And then on the other side, the quick to fire, won't talk as much about, but that's harder for us as a movement. We're such a relational people, which is one of the beautiful things about the Antioch movement, but that also at times can make it hard to fire people. Particularly, we found that our staff really feels that family environment and that we try to create, and they love it. It's like it's tight community. And so even those that have left for other reasons or had to move or do this or that, they talk about, like, oh, it's so hard not to be. And so we felt that with people even that we're needing to fire and move on. And so of course when you're doing that, you want to to be very clear and give people opportunities to change anything that they need to change, attitudes or work habits or whatever, and give them proper times and feedback along the way. That's why a culture of feedback is huge, so that it's not blindsiding them. But in the end, I mean, we had one fairly recently that we had done that pretty well, I think, along the way, and then we gave a real specific, like, hey, this really needs to change. But then we let it drag on an entire another year with seeing no change, and just because we were dragging our feet. And in the end, it's just not. It's a drain on the staff, and it's a damper on the culture that you've created. And so we're learning to be a little more quick on the letting go of someone. So, but that just kind of an example of kind of the chemistry regarding the culture that you have. Another thing is this team structure. I'll say this: the decision-making structure of a team will change over time. So who is making the kind of higher level decisions for the church? In the beginning, it's the whole team. And we had those night team meetings, and we were getting together, and we discussed everything from young adults to college to kids to Sunday morning service to any kind of admin type of stuff that there's questions about, and we did it all. And so and that was great for that phase. Eventually, particularly as we kind of added a couple more people that were coming on and different things, we had to morph. There was too many people. There was too many decisions that needed to be made. And so we developed a senior leadership team. And that senior leadership team for us was comprised of 4 people. And we were able to meet to be more of the visionary leaders and make some of the higher level decisions for the church, and to really streamline that process. And so certainly that was a prayerful move in who that is. And at that point, we did not do elders. In many ways, they function as elders, but again, even as we're biblically admonished to not be hasty in the laying on hands of elders, we felt like a great next step was senior leadership team. And so we had that operated for a couple of years before we began the process of then having elders. So the elders were the ones that were making those decisions. And then as our church grew, we actually we were trying to get the elders to focus more on visionary things, personnel, finances, overall direction of the church, and get less of the details or the executing of the vision, because it was just beginning to be too much. And so we developed an executive team that kind of served under that the elder team, and they were executing some of the vision pieces. They were putting a little more of the details into it. Okay, how's this actually going to be carried out? And what are the people needed to carry it out? How can we communicate that to the right people in the right timing? And so now we've had to take some of those things off the executive team's plate. And so now there are sub-teams that form for, say, something like a fall festival that we have as a big outreach event. The executive team is not going into all the details of that. We have a team that's hitting the details of that. And so that just is the way kind of the decision making and the executing of the vision morphs and expands over time. The last thing that I want to say, and then we're going to move into kind of the second portion of the teaching here on the 3 core attributes, is this. As we've grown, and I would say kind of more into the season that we're in now, one of the things that we have really had to get better at is developing people. I love developing people. That's particularly in terms of our staff, that's one of the passions that I have. I love hearing about what's your calling in God. Like, who do you want to be? You know, where do you want to go in God? Those types of things. And then trying to position them in a place where their trajectory is to get there. I love that. I love talking through that. And so that's something we've always tried to do. But that's also been very intuitive in general. And so we began getting the feedback a couple of years ago of like, we don't feel so developed. And I'm like, what? You're being discipled. You get opportunities to serve in ministry. Like, we're living life together, doing staff meeting. You're in it here. But what people were asking for was something more clear and specific. And so we've really developed a great system of development, and that takes a great deal of clarity in expectations. What are the expectations that we have for you in how you do your work and how you spend your time? And Andy Salsky, our executive pastor, has done a great job of researching and figuring out what are ways to do this in a way that benefits people, that obviously develops them, but also benefits the entire church because they're growing in their gifting. And so that begins with a job description, and we've really morphed. We've always had job descriptions, but kind of morphed how we've done those. And actually, I'd like to send you guys a copy of that, as well as we've got a handout that we're going to send out afterwards here. But in those job descriptions, we've got kind of detailed out the different responsibilities, the different expectations, along with the percentage of your time that you'd spend on that, and then it's detailed out in how many hours that is, generally speaking, on each of those different job requirements. In the job description, everyone then has what we call team competencies. And this is just what are the competencies that you will need to have and function in as a member of this staff. And then we have relational values. So this is some of the character and heart attitudes that we have towards one another that you need to exhibit and that you're expected to exhibit as a member of this staff. And so with that, we encourage a constant culture of feedback. That's something we're trying to always increase and always try to grow in, both on the encouraging side of things and on the challenging side of things. But we twice a year have a very specific time for that to happen in what we call evals, or evaluations. And so twice a year, people will get an evaluation form to fill out for themselves. Their manager, everybody has a manager as well as somebody that disciples them, but their manager will also get that same form, and they fill it out for that person, and then they will sit down with the executive pastor and go over this evaluation form, and we can send you one of those as well. They've been very, very helpful. And so you see how people mark themselves, you see how the managers mark them, and you give them the encouragements of all that they're doing. You respond to the feedback that they have, and then you bring them the places of challenge for their own growth and how they can grow in the role, in the specific contributions that they have committed to have for the team. And so that's just one of the ways that we've really upped the area of development, and it's changed people. I mean, we don't get the I don't feel developed anymore. I mean, it's people feel like, okay, there are specific expectations, and I've got somebody managing me and kind of checking in with me on a more regular basis. We've got these evals that I'm filling out, my manager's filling out. There's just more of a systematic structure, and so that's kind of a general place of scaling for a church as you're going from solely intuitive into there's a few more systems that help people understand, particularly those that aren't as intuitive as you, help to understand, okay, what's going on, okay, how am I being developed, and they get a real sense of it. And so that's been incredibly helpful for us as a church. And so that's really the end of the portion for developing, scaling team. And so now I want to move into the area. Oh, there is. So we got a question here.
Okay, question is from Ted in Ann Arbor. In your opinion, as we build our teams, are we to develop people into leaders, or to develop people who are already leaders?
Thanks, Ted from Ann Arbor. So I would say this, and so it's his question. I don't know if you could hear or not, but his question is: are we, as we develop team, to what is it? Develop people into leaders, or
develop
find leaders that could. Yeah, I would say in a launch team, you want people that can certainly transfer DNA, but I wouldn't say that they have to be high-performing leaders. I think certainly in the process of planting a church, there's going to be maturity that happens in them, and part of that maturity will be in developing as a leader. But I'll also say that most people would say, I've heard this illustration, that that initial launch team often is the scaffolding for building the church. So they're what's in place, and they're helping to build the church. But when the church is built, or when you kind of start to become, okay, we're not just a church plant, we're not just building or planting this thing, we're actually a church, that the scaffolding often goes away. And so I think that's many people's experience, is that they were called for that season, and they carried the values deeply. They had great chemistry with you. They were able to draw people in, disciple and love people, but they weren't necessarily, or didn't develop necessarily, into leaders that are going to be really able to lead larger numbers of people. And they just end up, by God's grace, even not even just you having to redirect them, but by the grace of God, like, this is what I was called to in this season, and they're moving on. We've had a little bit of a different experience. We've got 6 of our original 9 are still a part of the staff. The other 3 are still leading life group and different things, but they have a full-time job, or they're mommy or whatever now. But I think in large part that's been people's experience. And so I don't think you just have to find leaders, particularly for that launch phase. That would be more in the scaling, where you're looking, okay, who are people that can really lead larger numbers of people? Because leadership, in one sense, is just influencing others. So we all have some leadership in us. It's just, some people can influence smaller groups, and other people have the gifting, the grace to influence larger groups. But on that launch team, I think you're looking for, you're not having to find high caliber leaders. If you have them and you've got chemistry with them, absolutely, and there'll be that much more dynamic for your team early on. But I wouldn't list that as one of the key factors in drawing a team together. And so I think that's how I'd answer that question.
We got another one from Scott in Boone, North Carolina. Interested in the leadership development strategy between the way we would develop and empower leaders, like in more of the life group leadership model, where it's actually becoming more decentralized, where more and more people are owning things, and it's less, versus the leadership development of your core mission, like the core team and people who are carrying like weight and responsibility, and how I guess you balance those. How you balance those two things. I guess you're trying to do both at the same time, but how you would maybe treat it differently, and your approach to that.
Yeah, so Scott in North Carolina was asking about not just the core development of your team or your staff, but also how does that balance with giving greater numbers of people leadership, particularly in the life group. And so one thing I'll often say to our church is that life groups are the heart of our church. If you're not in a part of a life group, you're missing out on a significant piece of who we are as a church. And so we highly value life group, as I know we all do. Don't need to say that, but in that, one of the things that I'll often tell our life group leaders is that you are like, this is your flock. Like you're leading a church, and because we really hold that value of like, I can't, nor can our staff be pastor to all these people. We just can't. I don't know them, don't know their names, I don't know how many kids they have. and really empowering them and thanking them every time we get together, because we have regular times of checking in and meeting together, all of our life group leaders, and then our different zones in different sections having meetings together. So really trying to keep them in vision and empowered. And so that's something that's very significant that I try to communicate regularly, is like, hey, this is your little church. Like, I want them to call you when their kid breaks their arm, to come to the hospital before they call me, like that. And that's often what happens. I'm like, hey, absolutely, anytime you call me, anytime you need covering, anytime you need me to step in or help with any pastoral situation, I'm there for you. But this is your church as you meet in your house, and so we try to give them the equipping for that, but also the empowerment for that. So I'm not sure if that, I hope that helps to answer that question. But certainly, as we've grown as a church, even grown as a staff, the need for more life groups has increased, and so we've had to keep up with that. I mean, and that's something we're always having to try to keep up with, to have more life groups. And so that's certainly a big part of what we do, is the development of life group leaders and getting more people in that, and really giving them ownership in that. So, all right, great. Hope that was helpful. Well, let me go in. We'll be a little shorter on this section, but let me get into these three, what I just put here as core attributes for a leader. And the first one is humility. And that might be obvious. I mean, I know, another thing I love about our movement, there's a lot of things I love, but is that we're marked by humility. From the first time I set foot in Antioch, I was blown away by the humility of men and women who have done great things for God. They're just humble, and it just is on them. It's not just like they say the right things. There's something on them, and so I love that about who we are. I want to read real quick James 4:6. God opposes the proud and shows favor to the humble. This verse for me, it's like so clear of where I want to be. Like, I know which side I want to be on. So you have this picture of God opposing the proud. I always picture like he's like stiff arming. Like, no, you cannot go any further. And ultimately, God's heart for us is that we would be broken. Like, I have to break you so I don't have to resist you anymore. I don't want to resist you. And so I've got to break you so I don't have to resist you. But and then the other side of it is God shows favor to the humble. Man, have I prayed for that in my life. God, just like, God, I need your favor. God, give us your favor. Other translations say, he gives grace to the humble. And I always picture this canopy going out before me. Just this canopy, this covering of grace that I'm able to walk in. And I'm like, God, I need that. I need your favor. So instead of like God resisting me, I see it as like his hand is at my back. The wind of the Spirit blowing behind me and moving me forward. So very clear where I want to be. Like, God, I do not want to have pride. I do not want to have arrogance. I want to be broken, submitted, humble before you. And so, that's what we're going after. And you haven't arrived. I haven't arrived. I don't want to get to that place of like, okay, I'm humble. Like, Antioch, we're humble. Like, I want to keep going there because I want the favor of God. I want the grace of God on what He's called me to do in my life. And so, a few things in the area of humility that I want to say. First of all, know that you will draw the most amount of hard feelings and criticism and frustration. More than anybody else on your team, anybody else on your staff, you're going to draw people's frustration, criticism, and hard feelings because you're the bottom line authority. And so whether that's because they've got an issue with authority, or whether that's because they have unmet expectations and what it was going to be like to come out here. And I'm specifically, obviously you're going to get this from your church as well, but I'm specifically talking about staff, like unmet expectations of they moved all the way out here and we're not growing like we thought, or, we don't have any money left, or we don't, and there's, or, times where they just don't feel like you're doing a good job, or you made a poor decision, or whatever it is that's coming at you. So you have to be willing to receive the proverbial word vomit, or whatever it is that comes at you. It's key how you respond. And we've got to respond with the heart of Jesus. We've got to take the low road every single time. You take the hits. And you genuinely in that try to receive what is truth in that. You receive what is truth in that. You also have to learn, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, learn how to let other things kind of roll off your back, that those things that are darts or arrows or lies. But you receive what's genuine, and you move into a place of apology, of any pain that you've caused, or the church has caused, or any disappointment that they felt, and you try to specifically acknowledge that the things that you've drawn out, that like, yes, we do need to grow in that, or we do need a change in that. And when you do this and you do it well, you earn the hearts and loyalty of people. When you respond that way, you respond in that opposite spirit, you earn, you get the affection and the hearts and loyalty of people, and you never get there by not being wrong. That's not going to get you there. If you willing not to be wrong will never get you there. You won't get there by allowing your strength of opinion or your strength of personality to lead the way. You won't get there in terms of winning the hearts of the people that are close to you. When they're frustrated, when they're hurt, when they're this and that. I'm not, if somebody's like, that's just their MO and it just keeps happening, you may need to have conversations, very real conversations. But I'm talking about people that are just genuinely feeling frustrated, feeling hurt, and they've come to you as the authority, and they're just kind of letting it all out, and it's unfiltered. You will never win their heart or their affection, or even their trust, by allowing your strength, particularly your strength of personality, depending on your personality, or your strength of opinion, like you're not right, like this is just wrong, you're off base. That's never going to win the day. And so you've really got to learn to be humble in that way. Also, I'd say you need to learn to be approachable and accessible. On the accessible side of things, that's a lot easier early on. You're in the same boat together. You're doing it all together, and so you're remaining accessible time-wise to people, and time and space. And that gets a little harder as you get bigger. And in fact, one of the things we realized was happening in our church was I really wasn't getting in touch with a good number of our staff. Because of the amount of staff, because of the number of people that are leading different areas of the church now. And so last year we decided to have me start intentionally, and we communicated with the staff that this is something that they're going to do and something that I want to initiate doing. And that is to meet with each staff member once a semester. Again, some of them I meet with on a more regular basis, but that everybody at least once a semester I'm going to be meeting with them, and it is great. Like just getting that connect, and it's not a lot, but it's that connect, that deep check-in. So for about an hour I would meet with each one of the staff. So that's kind of part of that accessibility. The approachability is a little different. That's being an approachable person. And so a few aspects of that are really hearing people, really being able to hear people and their needs and concerns. One of the things that I got feedback from my team early on, very early on, was that I was kind of listening to them, going through the motions of like kind of letting them voice opinions, but not really hearing them. Like the decision's already been made. I felt, and this was awesome, part of being under an apostolic movement of high-level leaders. I felt like when we came out to launch the church, God just gave me a new mantle of leadership to be able to lead people, which was much needed. But I hadn't learned yet how to navigate a strength of leadership with also walking with people, and so they felt like I was just kind of plowing through on decisions, or like, man, I already knew the decision I made, and I'll kind of placate them being able to give their opinion, but not really hearing them or not really valuing their opinion. And so that's something I had to really learn. I was like, okay, wow, I really don't want that. I didn't mean to do that, but I was plowing through. And so people need to be listened to, or not just listened to, but they need to feel like they're really heard. And it's important, and it's important for buy-in too. I mean, you want people bought in. You cannot do it yourself, so you want people bought in. Most people are not wanting to make all the decisions, but they want to be truly heard, and for their opinions to be weighed. And so, very important. Not making people feel like it's their fault. When people come to you with different things, or they feel like they've failed, you're not so bent on the mission that you're like, man, we got to pick that up, man, you got to do a better job next time. But you're sympathizing with them. You're saying, you're sorry. You're feeling with them the disappointment that they have. You're coming alongside like, hey, it's okay. We can we'll do it better next time. We'll pick it up. So again, just approachable. People can come to you even in the places of their disappointment or failures. That you're approachable in that way. And so the next thing I want to say is that I think what goes right into that is actually acknowledging you can't do it all. So it's the idea that you're even voicing the needs that you have, the weaknesses that you have, that you're not trying to cover those up, you're not trying to hide those things, but you're acknowledging those things. And sometimes you might have opportunity to directly acknowledge specifically those weaknesses. Another way that you acknowledge it is talking about the strengths of others. You really commend people in front of others for the contributions they're bringing to the church. That, man, this would never be happening without this person that's doing such a great job in this area. And so really building up those around you to do that are contributing to the mission that we're all here for. Another thing I'd say is giving ownership to others. It's not micromanaging and controlling, like, okay, I've got to be at the center of it. I've kind of got to be the voice for it. But you've got to allow others to rise up and to own things. They need to own things. Leaders need to own things. And again, that's an acknowledgement of I can't do it all. Knowing you can't do it all means you've got to give ownership to other people. You've got to be able to release things and let people run with things. Finally, I'll say this on humility. Nothing is above you. And so taking out the trash, being the last one there, and some of this morphs a little bit on the dirty work that you'll be doing over time, because servants begin to rise up and different things. But even today, I don't want to be above doing the thing that nobody else wants to do. That's humility. Like, I want to lead by example, particularly in the things that nobody else wants to do. Because if I'm not willing to do those things and always expecting somebody else to do those things, then that can create resentment. And so never want to find myself in that position. So always looking to demonstrate being willing to do the things that aren't desirable to do. So the first one is humility. The next one I want to talk about is confidence. And in some ways those are kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of the opposite. So humility and confidence. Actually, I think the combination of those two things would be the biblical definition of meekness. And so in confidence, I actually want to start by reading Ephesians chapter 3, verse 7 through 13. Paul says, I became a servant of this gospel by the gift of God's grace given me through the working of his power. Although I am less than the least of all the Lord's people, this grace was given me, to preach to the Gentiles the boundless riches of Christ, and to make plain to everyone the administration of this mystery, which for ages past was kept hidden in God, who created all things. His intent was that now, through the church, the manifold wisdom of God should be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms, according to his eternal purpose that he accomplished in Christ Jesus our Lord. In him and through him, and through faith in him, we may approach God with freedom and confidence. I ask you, therefore, not to be discouraged because of my sufferings for you, which are your glory. And so I wanted to read this because of the confidence that we see in Paul in the calling that he had. And it's certainly mixed with the humility that we just talked about. He's like, I don't know why God called me. Like, I'm the least of all. You know, he's like, I could think of 100 other people that I personally feel like would be more suited to this call. But nonetheless, he has called me. And this is what he's called me to. And so this is what I'm giving my life to. It's what I'm going to be about. And so there's just this humble confidence that he has that allows him to go through, as he said in the end, the sufferings, the trials of the call. And so there's got to be a confidence in the calling of God on your life. When criticism comes, when you have less than stellar performances, when you have setbacks as a church, you are confident in what God has called you to do, and you're going to be faithful to do it. You're not falling into the traps of comparison or competition. You're not going to be able to communicate like Francis Chan. You're not going to maybe have the apostolic authority of a Jimmy Seibert. You know, you're not going to have these things. But it's like, but God has called me to this, and so I'm going to give myself to it, and I'm going to have a confidence in that, not because of my skills and abilities, but because of his call on my life and because he's with me. So huge in that it brings a steadfastness. So the part of this confidence is steadfastness. It's becoming unflappable, and so huge for your staff, but because there are ups and downs in this journey, right? I mean, there are ups and downs in it, but we've got to find the place where we are not on the emotional roller coaster of how things are going, how many people came to church each week, or what somebody said about me, or somebody that's disheartened. And I'll tell you this, it's hard when staff is disheartened or when staff is disappointed in you. And there's gonna be days like that. There's gonna be highs and lows, excited times, sad times that people are disappointed in you. Sometimes people are gonna think you're amazing. And so what does it look like for you to be steadfast in the call of the Lord? Just gonna be faithful in what he's put right before me. And so your confidence allows you to be steadfast and unflappable while still remaining humble, as we talked about earlier. This is where I'll say it again, letting things roll off your back. I really struggled in the process once God had kind of spoke to me to plant a church. In that process leading up to it, I was like, God, I don't know, like I feel like I'm good or decent at a lot of things, but not great at anything. Like what am I offering? And often I'll tell people, like, I think my greatest strength as a church planner is that things just roll off my back, which is a pretty good attribute actually now that I've gotten into it. That as people have accusations or as there's hardships or people have a hard time, it's like there's this natural ability that God's given me to let things roll off my back. My wife always gives me a hard time because I'll be like, she'll be like, oh, how did that feel? I was like, I don't think they really meant that. Like, that's my go-to. Like, yeah, I know they said it, but I don't think they really meant that. That's just like my go-to, or maybe that's my defense mechanism or something. But nonetheless, it's an important trait of like, what does that look like to have confidence in God and my calling, to change the analogy to take the darts out and just like, okay, no, that's not true. And I'm gonna remain steadfast in what God's called me to. So there's got to be something about letting things roll off your back, and it might not even be that you have to go there spiritually. What's the verse that combats the lie? Sometimes there's a place for that. Sometimes there's a place just, I think, for just like, okay, I'm just kind of brush that one off, and we're gonna leave it over there. And so let things roll off your back. Last thing I'll say on this one is you've got to be at a place of confidence and knowing your identity so that you can allow people to rise to their full potential. And I mentioned this a little bit in humility, where you've got to let people, have ownership and all. But this is a whole nother level of that, or a different angle on it at least. Because first of all, you need people to rise to their potential, and even if that's higher than yours in different aspects. One of the things I've heard is that on average, one person can pastor or lead about 100 people. Now, I'm sure depending on gifting and capacity, whatever, that might vary a little bit. But even if you're able to lead 150 people, you've got a limitation on how many people can look to you. But that's my pastor. At some point, you're not going to be as accessible. They're going to need to be able to see somebody that there's a pastor that I can go to. That this person's my a pastoral covering for me. And so you need other people to rise up to the level where they have an authority. Where they're seen in a certain respect, where people feel like I can come under that person and their leadership. So you need other people to rise up in their leadership, and at times this is going to take a great deal of security. I've personally had just different moments that people have done things really well, and of course I'm excited, but it can be tempting to have a Saul and David moment where somebody does something real good. Maybe they give a devotional in staff, or they give a prophetic word, and things blow up, and they're ministering, and like, man, that's powerful. Or I gave a devotional similar to that a few months ago. Nobody said anything about that, and now nobody can stop talking about this one, or anything like that. There's a fleshly temptation to have that Saul-David moment where Saul hears the singers talking about all the people that David has slain versus the few people that he has slain. It's like, wait, what the heck's happening here? And he starts, then he goes into the throwing spears thing. So you don't want to find yourself in that position. But that's a real fleshly temptation. And so you've got to deal with that. I'm like, okay, no, I want people to excel. I want people to rise in their gifting, even if it overlaps with some of my gifting in that regard. And so there's a confidence, a security that has to be present to allow people to really excel at high levels in who they are in God, and not let that threaten you. Like those moments, those opportunities, those are good. Those are good for you. Those are good for the church. They're good for your staff. And so there's a confidence needed to be able to do that. All right, lastly, I want to talk about wisdom. So we've got humility, confidence, and then I think wisdom is kind of putting it all together a little bit. James 1:5-6 says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. All right, this is another no-brainer scripture. Like, we're told to ask for wisdom, and God will give it generously. So ask for it. Like that's another one of those prayers. And I'm like, God, wisdom. God, I need wisdom. God, grant me wisdom. God, I know you want to give me wisdom to lead. There's people. There's a staff. There's a church. God, I need your wisdom. I want to lead with wisdom. God, give me wisdom. It's one of those very clear things that's like, okay, it's what it says. I'm going to ask. I'm going to believe that God wants to give me wisdom, because it's so key to leading a team and leading a church. And so I want to start with the idea of quality control. Now some of what I'm going to say here actually will play in with some of the things I said earlier on humility, and will kind of help to balance it. And so there is quality control. Though people are rising up, though you're giving ownership, that doesn't mean that you are not still taking the lead. And when I talk about quality control, that could be something like a Sunday service where you're wanting it to be excellent, and you're helping to provide some of the quality for that. But it also means the culture, that you're hands-on in what's the culture that we have as a church, and the culture that we have as a staff. And so you've got to be in the center of that. As the lead pastor. And so when push comes to shove, the development of people, which we've talked a lot about in staff, like we're developing people, it cannot trump the quality control of culture, or even a Sunday morning experience. Meaning, you don't put somebody's development over a subpar culture. And so you may look for other opportunities for them to establish their abilities or their skills, taking risk on smaller stages, those types of things. But you're really using wisdom in how to provide quality control for the church. It's not that you're just like, you're kind of more laid back and like, oh yeah, let people have ownership and them do this and them do that. I still have a lot of say in that. I still want to speak into that. And of course, over time, we've now come to a place where there's people that we've walked long enough together. We're on the same wavelength. We've got the same heart. We know the expectations that we have, and so there's more and more ownership, even to the level where I'm not in every meeting and I'm not making every decision, because we've had that level of walking together in this process. But when I say giving ownership, I'm saying you're doing that with wisdom. You're doing that with thinking about the quality of culture. And there's things that you'll always be leading. There are some things that you're going to hand off, but you want to do that with wisdom. A lot of this wisdom piece is threading the needle on things. Like, yes, we're developing people. Yes, we're wanting to give people ownership, but not at the sacrifice of what people experience in the culture, the atmosphere of what we're doing, because we want to take down every hurdle for people to encountering more of God. And so, so in that, I would say, stay in the game. Don't, if you're tired, and you will get tired, and you feel like your hands in so many things, don't exit the game too early, where you release people before they're ready. You may need to keep your hands in it. And even the guys that I really trust that are leading things wonderfully, we still have check-ins, like, how are things going? How is it going? And they'll still come to me with different things, like, okay, what about this decision? I want to make sure that we're handling this in the right way. There's a great, there's a great relational balance in it as well. I want to say this. You're not only a visionary leader, but you're a caring pastor. And so again, the wisdom of that balance. Like, yes, you are a visionary leader. Absolutely. You're bringing vision, but you're also a caring pastor. And so how do you bring both of that? And now, if pastoring is not your strength, certainly you want to get pastors on your staff, again, to complement you. But that doesn't take you out of the game altogether on pastoring, particularly your staff. You're trying to create community and family, and so they need to know you not as just the driving visionary leader, but as a pastor as well. And that kind of leads into the proper mix of mission and relationship. This is a big one. This is the big one in terms of, we're all here for the mission. That's what we signed up for, and that's where we're going. But people also very much need relationship. And that's who we are as a people. Like, we're a relationship. We're not just a staff that's been hired from all over, don't really know each other, that, like, we just came here to do a job. That's not who we are. And so we really have to thread the needle on mission and relationship. And so like for example, when we were first here, one of the things we did is like, we're going to run hard, and we're going to be a people that run hard. And so we did 100 days, and that's when we did that, waiting on the Lord, how many people we're going to share with every day. We're going to live 100 days like we're on a short-term mission trip. I mean, it was pretty intense. But at the end we said, and we're going to have a retreat. And so we went up to a beautiful area, Sedona, near us, and had a 3-day retreat afterwards where we just worshiped, we shared testimonies, we played games, we ate together. It was like, and we just celebrated all that God was doing. And so there's mixes like that we try to do. We've had times where we've fasted all together. We fasted for 11 days as a staff one time, believing for certain things. A little bit of a long fast to call everybody to, but we went for it. People bought in, and then we just. But we were in it together, and we celebrated, and we saw breakthroughs, and we made sure that we took time to celebrate what God was doing. We try to do some kind of staff getaway yearly. We try to do a couple of staff fun days a year on the relational side of things. We try to be intentional about really heavy seasons in our church of just running really hard. Of like, okay, how can we break that up a little bit? How can we celebrate people? How can we thank people? We do a thing where quarterly we honor a couple of people who have really laid down their lives, and we give them a $100 gift card. We celebrate them and that type of thing. So we try to build in a lot of the relational elements in specific ways, not to mention the ongoing ways of community that we try to establish in celebrating birthdays and this and that. But there certainly is a real balance there, and so because the mission is important, and that's established. We're going to run hard as a church, but not at the expense of relationship. So think about the question is the expansion of the church or the mission more important than me? At one level, I'd say yes, in that we're all called to lay down our lives for the gospel. And so at that level, personally before the Lord, yeah, I lay down my life to see your kingdom come, to see your church established. But on a personal level, people can't consistently feel that from you. So we were really feeling the need to have a fourth service, and in the end, we just felt like we couldn't do it because of our staff. And so we ended up being able to blow out a wall in one of the part of our sanctuary and add a few more people. Is not as great of a solution, but we in the end felt like though we might sacrifice some growth, we don't feel like we can do that to our staff. We don't feel like we can do that to them. We care too much about their emotional health. We need them healthy too. So, I want people to sacrifice for the vision, but I won't sacrifice people on behalf of the vision. Right? So I want people to sacrifice for the vision, and we want to be a sacrificial people. So I want people to sacrifice for the vision, but I won't sacrifice people for the vision. That's a different thing altogether. They've got to come to a place of being willing to sacrifice themselves, not me sacrificing them on the altar of building something. And so, one of the best ways I've found to get people really to the place of sacrifice is that I sacrifice, and that I should sacrifice more than anybody else. There should be something in me in the way that I sacrifice that inspires other people to sacrifice. I don't have to hold sacrifice over their heads of like, wow, you're not really this or that. Like, no, I'm just leading the way and trusting that people are gonna come in behind me in that. So there's certainly times that you can address individuals if you feel like that's not where they are, and you can have a conversation about that. But you keep modeling, you keep going first, and ultimately people are going to come behind you. Couple more quick things. Part of the piece of wisdom is knowing how to navigate relationally complex situations, and those vary so much. But again, that idea of threading the needle of what you feel like is best and what you intended something to look like and then somebody that had a misconception of that or isn't living up to that, or how do you navigate that relationally? And so it's kind of the balance of having something your way versus a relational equity that would be lost. And so you're navigating things and just deciding, like, kind of one of those, is this a hill to die on, versus, like, losing some relational equity, like, or can I just, like, okay, it's not going to be exactly how I wanted it to be, but because of the situation, I don't want to make the ultimate decision that would ultimately cost the relational equity. So again, not something I'll go into in depth, but just those are the types of things where we're always having to thread that needle. In decision making, you're not being hasty in decisions. I think for me at least, I'd rather a little bit of a slower decision that's right than a quick decision that ends up being wrong in the end, that has consequences attached to it. So certainly you need to be deliberate in decisions. The desire is to be decisive in decisions, but not to be too quick. Kind of the same thing of the slow to hire idea. And then of course vision. Like being really capable and really increasing in your ability to share vision and to share it in different ways, and part of that's getting testimonies of what's going on and just people staying in vision for what you're doing. It's kind of keeping that the momentum of the staff, the energy of the staff, the buy-in of the staff high because of what God's doing. So really keeping that, leading with that vision piece, not only why we're here, but what's happening because of why we're here. And so vision is great. And so I'll end the wisdom piece with this. The two great weapons of a leader are communication and decision making. And so, and particularly in this communication, it's the vision. It's communicating also why we're doing what we're doing. It's communicating not just the overall vision of the church, but the vision for any particular thing that you're asking people to do. So being able to communicate that in a way that brings buy-in, in a way that captures people's heart. It's decision making, and so you really gain trust when people see that, wow, this person makes wise, godly decisions that bear much fruit. And so really growing and increasing in our decision making, because that's two of the greatest weapons that we have to impact those that we are leading. We don't want to be careless or haphazard in our decision making and our communication. In our communication, we're always thinking, okay, how is this going to affect people? What are the questions that people are going to be asking? How is it going to affect particular individuals in this room? What are people going to be feeling? And really trying to address and think through those things even as you communicate the vision or whatever decision is being made. Because in having good communication, orderly communication, meaning what is the order of the people we need to talk to in a particular order, so that it would be honoring to all involved. What's the order of communication, and making wise decisions really limits the pain and frustration that your staff will have to go through. So this has been incredibly fruitful in the life of our church. The camaraderie of our staff, it's life to me. It's been my greatest friendships are in our staff. People feel like our staff is family. It feels like it's really the backbone of the success we've had as a church, is the quality of people and the family-like environment that we have on the staff that's trickled down to others. A couple of quick resources I just want to mention. These are pretty well known, but 5 Dysfunctions of a Team was a book that we went through before we even came out here. Talks a lot about, in the end, just developing a place of trust through being able to share the ideas that you have, even if there's disagreement. Good to Great is a wonderful leadership book, particularly for someone that's going to be a lead pastor. On the management side of leadership, if that's something you're wanting to grow in, there's a book called First Break All the Rules. So First Break All the Rules is a great one that we've learned from and used on the development side of our staff. So that's all I have. Was there any other questions that we had?
I don't see any right now.
Okay.
Let's just give it a couple seconds to see if some people, I think they were trying to talk with you there at the end.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thanks so much. As I said, we'd love to send you a little bit of material. Hopefully that will be helpful. Kind of give you a handout of some of the notes of the things that we went through this morning. But bless you. If we ever cross paths, I can't see you, you can see me. Please say hi and like, hey, I was there. Love to meet you, and just blessings in all your endeavors. Great to be with you today. All right.